My name is Beryl Leach, and I'm a director and head of policy and advocacy at AfrEA, working on gender inequity and what we need to do to change research and evaluation is something near and dear to my heart. And I've been working on it for many, many years in many various ways because recognizing gendered inequality is the first step to understanding why poverty and inequality is perpetuated. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over the microphone. The way we're going to do it is that I asked some of my colleagues to join me, and we had another colleague who was sick. But we're just going to share for a few moments about what we've been encountering in our work and the challenges and how we've tried to push the agenda to make gender and equity more visible in our work. And then also get feedback from people and how do they think, is that enough? What else can we be doing? What are some of the ideas? Because out of this session, we'd really like to be kicking off an increased awareness where everybody goes back out into the other sessions and starts to hear what people are saying differently. So what we want to change are your ears today, just to hear in a different way and question in a new way. Wait, why wasn't there anything about the impact on women and discussing that research? Why am I not hearing about girls in this presentation on education? When impact evaluation researchers are talking about what they're doing, why are they just talking about average effects, family this, all these ways that we as individuals and the roles that we play get made invisible because we get aggregated into something else. And then our particular issues get erased and are not reported. So, Adeline, with that, over to you.
I've been working in gender and equity issues since 1990. In fact, my master's thesis was around gender and equity. And in those days, those were early days, just coming out of women in development, going into gender and development. So you can see that I've been working on this path for a while. But it has been a struggle. It has not been easy. It's almost like you have to fight to get people to do the right thing, the thing that they know is the correct thing to do. So, for example, what have we, I'm not going to go yet into what have we been doing, but I'm going to start with just the challenges to convince people to include gender and equity in evaluations, and I'm focusing on evaluations. So one of the things that is said is that once you include gender, it becomes very expensive, and so we don't want to include gender, to make it gender responsive because it's very expensive. So that's an excuse. Another thing is that people have gone into sex disaggregation and ended there. Because sex disaggregation does not tell us anything. If you tell us that 30 boys and 30 girls, so what? Yeah, in the program. So we need to go deeper into some deeper analysis. I'll come back to that. In terms of what we've been doing, in 2003, the African Evaluation Association came together with then UN Women, or UNIFEM, before it was UN Women, to form what is called the Africa Gender and Development Evaluators Network. The network was formed to address these issues I've been talking about, to make sure that whatever evaluation is done, it is focused, is gender responsive, is equity focused and gender responsive. And we thought that was really a great milestone. So what did ACDEN do? In short, it's called ACDEN. ACDEN developed training material. I think in the first 5 years, they trained a lot of people in how to do gender responsive evaluations, gender and equity focused evaluations, and but it was upon demand. So after 5 years, people almost like started to put them to the side, push them to the side, and say, you are a standalone, so you do your own thing. So again, we went back to the beginning, where you don't have anybody listening to you, and this is where we start, really thinking about the way we mainstream gender. We've spoken about, people have recommended that to mainstream gender, you must have a standalone gender department, or you must mainstream it throughout. So as the African Evaluation Association, we formed this interest group, the ACTEN, African Gender and Equity, Development Network. But we found that as people changed faces, as leadership changed, very soon they were seen as something outside even AfrEA itself, and not even considered as an interest group within AfrEA, except for the few that had known how it was started. And so I think we worked with some development agencies that we really advocated for some development agencies to to insist that every evaluation must have a gender expert, to ensure that gender is taken into consideration. Because you see, when you call for evaluations or have an RFP and say you must have gender considerations, they will tell you that this evaluation will look at both men and women and see how they are being impacted. Those are buzzwords. It will be gender responsive. It will be all those issues. It will have a gender lens. But that is, when you actually then look at the design, the evaluation design, you will see that there's nothing. There's no gender analysis at all. And so that's one thing that we found. And so it helps to have somebody who knows. And one of the things that I found is that people sometimes do not include gender and equity issues because they don't know how to. And very often people think they know when they don't know. It reminds me of the Johari window, but they don't know what they don't know. So that's one thing. So I think it's important that we are clear as commissioners, whoever, if you're a commissioner, whether you're a research commissioner or an evaluation commissioner, that the people you are dealing with know how to. And if they don't, you might as well go into some 2 or 3 days training before the evaluation takes place, because I think it's very important. Another thing that always comes in is this was not a gender responsive program. It was not a gender program. So why do you want to make sure that the evaluation takes in consideration gender and equity? So any program that deals with human beings, has to be gender responsive and equity focused, regardless of what the design was. Yes, it would have been good to know to have a design that was already gender responsive, but in most cases programs are not like that. So as a result, we have unintended effects that actually cause more alienation of either women or men. And sometimes we assume that we are doing a certain thing to support the needs and responsibilities of men and women, but at the same time, we're actually causing negative effects. Sometimes we do find positive effects that will, come out of the intervention. But I think it's very important that we have that in mind. So I think I'll have more time to talk about it, but I think the first thing is our baseline must be gender and equity focused. We must do a gender analysis within our baseline so that when we go into either a midterm or any part evaluation, we know what we are looking out for. We know what was before and what was after. And lastly, what I've been, last week I was at a meeting where parliamentarians were meeting, and they were saying, most of the data that we get is not really, maybe sex-disaggregated, but there's no gender analysis. So we cannot quite make an informed decision based on the data that we get. And I know, and when I did, the evidence map training, when we were looking at the data, most of the data that is out there is actually not even, sex-disaggregated. Never mind, gender responsive or equity focused, because there's no further analysis. And so I think one of the things that is important is to work with people that produce evidence to ensure that they go deeper than just the figures, even if they're not asked. We want to go deeper and say if there's a difference between men and women, what is causing this difference? And women are not homogeneous. There are different groups of women, different groups of men, different groups of girls and boys. That needs to be considered within that. So Yeah, let me end here. Thank you.
I want to highlight some things that really struck me. One, everything you said was about power, and we are all still negotiating as if this was something that was a choice, that you can choose to sex disaggregate or not, that you could choose to have gender analysis or not, as if these are bolt-ons for a type of research. And there is a growing movement, and it's coming out of the humanitarian sector in many ways, where they're simply saying that it's unethical. If you do not consider gender, sex disaggregation is step one, but then you have to do the gender analysis. And that if you don't, it's unethical, and it is likely in the humanitarian sector especially to do harm. Now, changing the language and the way we're talking about it to that helps us take it from a parlor discussion or a discussion between you and your bottle, how am I going to design this, to these are standards. And that's where Mark's going to come in as a journal editor, because there are the keepers of the standards, and they're not convinced. And there are lots of built-in ways that they can keep these movements to do things differently, marginalized by the reward system. Now, we funded a study, and you reminded me of it, where we had a gender expert, internationally known and respected. And she was on a study in Uganda that was a transparency and accountability and natural resources study. So clearly people are being affected, and clearly differentially, by sex, by income, by location. Are you close to the resources? Are you going to be displaced? And on and on. And when the study came back, there were a lot of implementation issues with it. But what she did report was she was never part of the design. The design was controlled by men who, make a connection or not, I leave it to you, tended to preference a quantitative approach where these just weren't important, and that if she thought they were important, she was the gender expert, she could run some qualitative surveys, and they would see what would happen. Now, what ended up happening was they truncated the study so only the quantitative part of the design got implemented. Then they just basically said, oh, there's no time for anything else. So what had been funded as a gender-sensitive design, she lost the battle once she was in the team. And this happens a lot, that when you tokenistically say, well, add a gender expert, they get defeated. They get, I've been that token. You just get shouted down, you get marginalized. If you deal with economists, they have 1,000 seemingly smart reasons that they think that whatever you say is not necessary to what it is they need to be researching. It's a lonely battle when you are one-on-one against the holders of power and the holders of the research or evaluation that's being done. I would like us also to come back on a point where training seems not to be the answer. And we have a session later on today about capacity development. And I do think that in 30 years of promoting gender mainstreaming and building skills around this, that we have a very troubled history around the effectiveness of just training a bunch of people to go forward and you be the ambassadors. You change things. Because everything that Adeline said was, I'm describing a power structure that is designed and maintained to perpetuate a way of doing research and evaluation that does not take the gendered inequality of human beings adequately into account. And what I really loved was just sex disaggregating is not gender. And so with 2 minutes, what I will say is that what 3IE has adopted, and this is a very simple equation if you don't do anything else. How do I know if what I'm looking at is gender responsive? Is gender and gender differences to access, control of resources, is anything like that in any of the research or evaluation questions? The second thing to look for is, has there been sex disaggregation? Preferably to do gender analysis, you will also see further characteristics that are broken out and analyzed. So age is very important because these intersect with the gender norms. It's not just that you're born female. And income and education and the rest. But the starter is sex disaggregation. Then I look in another place very quickly. And all of this is now just taken less than 3 minutes, okay? I look at methods. Has there been any sort of this description? Ideally, they would say, all right, we use Mosher's gender analysis framework, all right? There are about 80 that have been published in journals that we would say are accepted gender analysis frameworks. Even if they don't, if they say we did this, this, and this, and then as part of our analysis of the data, we use the gender lens or we use gender analysis, then that okay, in the methods, I know they're taking this seriously. But then the last place I look, and still less than 5 minutes, is in the reporting of the results, into the conclusions and recommendations. Did they continue to report gender differences and what it meant? Because you can have a lot of good things happen and then you get to that part and it just disappears. And it can be because of the team, it can be it can be a journal editor has said, oh, you're over, start cutting this out, oh, that gender thread, just cut it out and you'll be under the word count, all right? And it's not always that, but every step of the way. But if you just needed 4 questions to ask quickly to know if you're seeing something that is gender responsive, then those are a good start. Key is, I don't want to pigeonhole you. It's not just that you're here as an editor of a journal who can help us understand that aspect of it, but you're a founding member of SAMEA, South African Monitoring and Evaluation Association, and you've been actively involved in working in development-related work for many years. So you'll be able to draw from all of that in pitching in with your perspectives. So without further ado, take it away.
Thanks, Bev. So the hat I'm wearing today is the editor-in-chief of the African Evaluation Journal, which is a publication of the African Evaluation Association. And whatever credit you gave Adeline earlier, she should also be credited for the existence of the journal. I would have closed it down a couple of years ago, but on her insistence and hard work, it's still there. So when Beryl invited both of us to participate in this panel, I jumped, not because of the topic itself, I mean, that is self-evident, but the opportunity to reflect on it. That was a huge opportunity. That's why I jumped. And where I work, Southern Hemisphere is based in Cape Town. I work with 9 other women. I'm the only male in the organization. And that's why I joined, because of the gender thing. But that's not why I selected or jumped on the topic. But it's because it helped me systematically reflect on the gender issue. And the way I've approached it is that gender has, and I think I wrote it in when she asked for my bio, I said, it is either through complacency, either through being compliant, or then becoming complicit. Those 3 concepts that I'll kind of trying to run through my little talk today. Now compliance, not compliance, complacency is something that started years ago, even when we were part of the mass democratic movement and kind of engaging in a troubling system we had in South Africa as kind of a democratic alternative that we supposedly have now. We had our gender issue on the side. The women's group would look after the women. They would take care of the women, and we would do the big noble things, as well us men would do. So that was taken care of. And it's continued even beyond 1994 in South Africa. We now have once a year 16 days of activism for the women. We're taking care of them. Those 16 days we want to harm women. The rest of the year it's open whatever season. So again, it's pigeonholed. The kind of complacency is taken care of. We are gender sensitive. We take care of them. The women these groups are organized. And that's the kind of complacency that there's, so because we're doing those little things, we can be complacent about that. And then sometimes we have people like Beryl prodding our conscience and like saying, there's a power issue here, then we become compliant. We have tick boxes, gender is ticked. In fact, it's written in our terms of reference. It's there, take care. We weren't funded appropriately, but it's there. There's a gender mentioned. We ask you to do kind of a sex analysis, and it shows that we are compliant. We have a Minister of Women Affairs. So there's a underfunded ministry taking care of women in the country, so we're compliant. Even politically, we are compliant, and so on. But because none of these things are done appropriately, because none of these things are done sincerely, we then become complicit in the inequality that happens beyond that. And the couple of slides that I'm showing you now is the journal slides, not per article analysis, but just the journal in general, how it started. I inherited the editorial board that was established by politically connected people who know about inequality. And we have an editorial board, still existing editorial board. There are 9 males and fewer females. It's been like that since its inception. We've had, it's something we can do something about, but it's there, We're compliant, we have both sexes in there somehow. They both have equal value, but they are not equal somehow. And this session helped me reflect on it. This is something we can do something about, but nobody's doing anything about it. Well, I managed to get Beryl onto the board, by the way.
So things are going to change.
Now it's going to change, And then I looked at the articles, and we've had 8 volumes since 2013. Each volume, gender contributions. Now, I put the stick figures up there so you can see we're very balanced. In 4 of the volumes, we have women outnumbering men. So I think we can pat ourselves on the back. Unfortunately not. Because I looked at those articles, I looked at the gender, I looked at where we have multiple authors, more than one author, we have more women. Women collaborate more in writing their articles. The men are single authors. And in fact, when they outnumber women, they outnumber them by quite a number, large number. So there's no equality there. There may be in 4 editions we have the same women. And I think it's ironic because there were a couple of editions, like health and evaluation, where you're supposed to be had more women in the caring professions, but there are more males writing about health and the caring profession in Africa, the evaluation of that. So I think if we do a deeper analysis, we can see that things are still as unequal as they were long ago. And then, this is the last slide there. I looked at the total number of reviewers we have on our books that we can call upon. By far, the male outnumber the women and the females. And I think the challenge here is not just because we make calls all the time, please be a reviewer and so on, and fewer women are standing up for themselves and saying, I want to be a reviewer. I'd really invite as many as possible, because it's one of those services that we do for this field. So we have inequality from the level of review board, the journal board. We have inequality in terms of the number of people who write the journal articles, and those who review our articles. We have the men outnumbering women. And this is when I say the last part, that we become complicit in making this inequality persist. And it is sessions like this, like the one that Beryl invited us to. It's going to end up. And that's why I jumped on the opportunity to to find out for myself as an individual, and for us as an organization, for us as a journal, where are we in this debate? And I think we are far from even the start of engaging in that debate. I mean, you spoke about the analyzing the content of the journal articles and looking how gender is. That's probably another step that we need to take. But I think even before we get there, and the content of the research is to look at how we structure the power relations in research, and because that's access to that kind of service as well. Who decides who gets published is a power game that's there, and depending on who's giving that access, we need to analyze those things as well. So I'm prepared, thanks to Beryl for the session, to go through this period of review and to look at where we are as a journal, to look at where do we need to appoint appropriate people, how do we need to open up the space for more women to enter this space, because if I can see this journal, which developed very organically through I think normal channels of growth, a number of organizations, the kind of number of journals out there and the power bases, and I also belong to the international committee of editors as well, I must say mainly men as well. So internationally we have the males dominating this publishing space, and as long as that persists, we're going to have this kind of inequality. So how we record the kind of biased research that's happening, I mean, it's obvious, it's evident, it's obvious that's how it's going to be reported as well, and how it's going to be presented in an academic way. So we have a huge challenge, and thanks for Beryl for organizing this space so that we can start talking, and not just talking about the inequality, but doing something about it. And it's something that, through AfrEA, I think we need to address, that gets changed, because this is something we can do something about. Thank you.